Good afternoon and welcome to the March 24, 2022 meeting of the Board of Library Trustees. First thing I'd like to do is ask our exemplary administrative assistant, Francesca, to describe the process for the public to participate. And she does a very good job at this, but you need to pay attention.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. There are two ways to virtually participate in meetings. You may join on Zoom using your computer or smartphone, and you may call into the Zoom meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To call in by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. If prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To make a public comment, raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand button in the Zoom toolbar. If you dialed in by phone, raise your hand by dialing *9 and unmute yourself when called upon by dialing *6. Attendees will be muted until it is your turn to speak. Public speakers are called on in the order of their hands raised. We do ask that you stay within the time limit established for today's meeting. If you are connected live on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. Today's meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you plan to make a public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone and ensure you join in time to accommodate the delay. As always, we do look forward to receiving your public comment.
Thank you very much, Francesca. And now could you please call the roll?
Yes, Trustee Felguth.
Present.
Trustee Joshi.
Present.
Trustee Moreau.
Present.
Trustee Petty.
Bob, you're muted.
You're here.
Here.
Thank you. And Trustee Thompson.
Here as well. Thank you. And the next item on our agenda is the consent items. And on today's meeting, we have 3 consent items. The first 2 are the minutes of the February 24 and March 10 meetings. And the third item on the consent calendar is the second reading and adoption of proposed revisions to Library Board Policies 150, which is access to the local history collection, and Policy 175, loan of laptops, telescopes, and other devices. Any of the trustees have questions on any of the 3 items on the consent calendar? Seeing none, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on items 1, 2, or 3 on the consent calendar?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or motion on the consent calendar?
I go ahead and move approval of all 3 items.
And I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jennifer, seconded by Marcia. Any further discussion? If not, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Yes, Trustee Felguth.
Yes.
Trustee Joshi.
Yes.
Trustee Moreau.
Yes.
Trustee Petty.
Yes.
And Chair Thompson.
Yes. Moving on, the next item on our agenda is the public comments section of the agenda, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address the library board on any subject that is not on our agenda. Francesca, could you see if there are any public comments at today's meeting?
Yes, to make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Okay, thank you very much. Then moving on to the public appearance items, which today is items 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we'll start with item number 4, which is to receive a report from the Ad Hoc Library Director Recruitment Committee and provide direction regarding the Library Director recruitment and selection process. And we had some interesting additional comments there, but I'm not sure I made them out. So I'll start with a bit of an overview because I'm part of the Ad Hoc Library Director Committee along with Marcia, and Assistant City Manager may be joining us shortly, and he might also have some additional comments to make. But it's actually a fairly short report. We had quite a bit of discussion at our last month's meeting, and and the board provided us some direction, our committee, as well as the city manager's office and the HR department. And we did issue a request for proposals called an RFP, and distributed that to about 20 executive recruitment firms. And by the deadline of Monday of last week, we received 3 proposals. And the committee went through those, and we sent them some questions to amplify on their proposal. And we received their responses to those additional questions. And Marcia did quite a few reference checks. And yesterday, Marcia and I met with Nat, and the 3 of us unanimously agreed upon a top-rated firm. And so we're now going to be working on trying to develop a contract agreement with that top-rated firm. That'll probably take about a week or so if things go well. And Inga's already started work on that, so we appreciate her work on that even late last night. And so we hope to have that approved in about a week, and then for the consultant to be able to start work in early April. And one of the first things they will probably do after kind of helping flesh out the overall approach that we want to take, that we can then report back to the board on. But one of the first things they'll want to do in some fashion, and we haven't really talked about the exact process for doing this, but is to get input from the members of the board, that from the trustees, as well as from some other stakeholders, on what are the particular qualifications we're looking for in an ideal library director candidate, to help give some guidance to the executive recruiting firm and what to be particularly looking for during the recruitment process. So one thing I'd ask all the trustees to do is start giving that a bit of thought, if you haven't already, what particular qualifications you think in our particular situation that we'll be dealing with are particularly important. I mean, we want someone that walks on water, of course, not just like Inga, but we may need to be a little bit more specific than that. So anyway, that's kind of my overview of my understanding of where we're at. And so I'd ask Marcia, and if Nat joins us, him as well, if she has anything to add to my overview.
It's just the one thing I wanted to add is that when we were looking for a firm, we looked specifically for somebody, a firm that would have library expertise, somebody who was going to work with us, who knows a lot about libraries, and someone who would not just post the ad and hope for a lot of responses, but would actually has a network in libraries around California and around the country, who would actually, be able to identify specific people who might be good candidates and go and call them. So that was one of the things that we looked for, and we think we found that in the firm. The other piece was somebody who really wants to understand what our library is all about and talk to us and the other stakeholders in order to really craft a compelling job description and brochure to reach out to people, so that we get the kind of person that we think would be a good fit here, not just a sort of generic library person. And so that was in our minds when we read the proposals, and that's been in our minds when I called references and said, how much involvement do these people have with libraries? How much do they know about libraries? We didn't just want a headhunter who says, oh, I can find you a library director or a city attorney or a finance director or anything else. We really wanted library expertise, and we think we got that. So I think it'll be a positive experience.
Yeah, in fact, thank you for those additional comments, Marcia. And in fact, that reminded me of something else I wanted to add, was that we found in this process, because as I mentioned, we sent it out to 20, in fact, I think it might have been 21 firms, and only got 3 responses. One of the things we've discovered is that the executive recruitment firms are extremely busy right now. I've done this sort of thing in previous situations that I had when I was an active city employee, and you would typically get more responses, and they wouldn't all seem so busy. So I think because of the pandemic and things that are opening up, cities and counties may have held off on hiring people, and now it's kind of like the the gates are open. And a lot of firms that we kind of expected to receive proposals from, we did not receive proposals from. But nonetheless, we did receive 3 good proposals. So I think we felt fortunate because we got a lot of emails from firms saying, we're sorry, we're just too busy to take on any additional recruitments at this point. So that is just one part of the flavor. But the other one I did want to indicate is that I think we did feel like we did get good proposals, and we definitely want to proceed with this recruitment. So anything else, Marcia, that you'd like to add, or Inga?
I was wondering, can I say something about the subject specialist that's part of this firm, or do we have to wait until the contract?
I wouldn't get into the specifics, but if you want to say something general, that would be fine.
Okay, I think there were 2 of the finalists had really strong subject specialists who know libraries very, very well. And so the firm that wound up being selected has a really strong specialist on their team. And so that's very exciting. And I forget what the other thing was. So anyway, I'm really excited to be supporting you as you work forward. Oh, I know. Quickly, when you were talking about qualifications, having read through their proposal, and by qualifications, I often think of things like the credentials and so forth. But I think what they also are going to be wanting to know is, somebody who is excellent with staff, support, or somebody who is very charismatic and not shy about, speaking publicly all over the place about how wonderful our library is. Those kinds of things are qualifications as well. Sort of as we think about where we are and where the library needs to go, another item would be somebody who has some successful experience with new facilities or renovating facilities.
Right.
So things like that the person could draw on. So I think that sky's the limit as you're brainstorming about what you want, and I'm sure there'll be a exciting discussion about it.
Oh yeah, there's many things. Skill in fundraising is also another important skill. But anyway, I thought that Nat might join us, but he hasn't yet. So I think we'll just go ahead. Any questions from the trustees about the process and where we're at, or any suggestions or anything?
Has a contract been signed then? This
No.
firm has been.
Well, no, we've come up with our top-rated firm, and we need, the next step is to negotiate the contract, and so we're just beginning that process, and we hope to have that completed within about a week. It takes a while to actually negotiate some of the provisions of the contract, and then it has to go through the city's approval process of risk management and finance and city attorney, et cetera. So it takes several days in the best of circumstances to get a contract actually executed. So that's why we think we should hold off on mentioning what firm we're working with until we actually have an executed contract, because there's some chance it won't work out and we'll have to go to our number 2 rated firm.
So I did want to mention that if we end up with our number 2 rated one, we're also doing very well. So we were equally, and that there's a lot of library expertise there also. So I think that's great. But there are, as one of the people pointed out, there are many libraries who have people who are in assistant director positions who have nowhere to go. And they're not looking for another job, but if someone were to present them with a great opportunity, if they were really good at what they're doing, those are the kinds of people that might not apply if it's out there, but if someone calls them and talks to them about it, they might. So that's why the outreach, I think, is so important.
Any other questions? Harish, you're muted, Harish. You're muted.
Okay, there. When we select these firms, is it on the basis of the candidates they present to us? Because that would suggest that we are prejudged. Or are we saying it's basis of the experience they bring rather than some specifics?
Well, we looked at the experience of the firms in general and in terms of doing recruitments of this type. And particularly, we were interested in their recent experience doing library director recruitments and whether they had a consultant that had, kind of a subject matter expert on libraries to help the process. So those, and of course, we also looked at the price and the general methodology and approach that they were proposing. So it's kind of a combination of all of those factors that we actually had a evaluation matrix that took all of those things into account and gave different weights to different factors. And we all, like I said, we all ended up unanimously with our top rated firm. It was each of the three of us, the top rated firm of each of the three people involved in the rating process.
And if I could add one piece, we also asked each one for the names of customers that they have served and libraries that they have had searches for.
Right.
And I called several of the libraries for each one and said, oh, you used this firm. Tell us about your experience. Was it successful? Did it, I had a set of questions to ask them to make sure that they weren't misrepresenting how a search went, to see how actually it did go.
And the firm, particularly the one that we're focused on right now, our top rated firm is quite well known in the executive recruiting arena for cities and counties and states and special districts, and have a number of recruitments going on currently. In fact, one of the issues will be them making room for us. Like I said, several firms did not submit proposals because they said they were too busy. They didn't have the capacity. And the firms that we're still talking to, the one in particular is also very busy. So, I think we would like them to start work, full time as soon as the second the contract is signed. But I think we may have to kind of evolve into it a little bit because they have a heavy workload already. So as much as we want to get going, believe me, as fast as possible on this, we may start a little slower than I would desire just because of the capacity. And they want to do a good job for all their current clients as well as us. So I understand that. But nonetheless, we may be a little frustrated that we can't get going full speed, the minute the contract is signed. But hopefully shortly thereafter we will.
I thought of two more things to say. So I think one thing is the amount of time it's estimated that the process will take once we have a firm on board is about 4 months. So the thinking, if everything goes well. So if the firm starts in the middle of April, you count out 4 months, that would be putting us in the middle of July when an offer would be made and hopefully accepted by the finalist. So that could mean, bringing somebody in August. Pretty good.
I think on a slightly more optimistic side, I think they did say it's possible in 12 or 13 weeks. So it could be a little shorter than that, but that my sense is that's probably optimistic. And of course, if we do offer the position to someone that's employed elsewhere, then they would need to give notice and potentially move. And, so there often is a lag period there before you can actually get someone started, even after you make the offer. So we always have to remember that, unless it's an inside person, in which case you might not have that.
Right. In working on the contract, I realized that, once we have our finalists and they've accepted the position, that the work of the contractor is pretty much done. However, there could be a delay in when that person then can start at the Monterey Public Library. Which I think is what Jim just said. But the other thing I wanted to mention with the high number of recruitments that are going on right now for department heads across the state and elsewhere, I think Trustee Petty can appreciate that this is also, it's not only just a result of COVID and people sort of thinking about, the future and their priorities, but it's also baby boomer phenomenon. And Bob is very familiar with baby boomers and the impact of baby boomers aging. And I think we're getting sort of the tail end of the baby boomers now. There's a surge going on with people retiring.
And there's also I don't know what you want to call it, but anyway, a lot of people referring to it as the Great Resignation, that whether it's retirement or just changing fields or doing other things, I think a lot of people are kind of rethinking their lives and what their current career path is and what they want to be doing. So I think it's a little bit of a lot of things, I think, that's making it extremely busy for these executive recruitment firms. I've never seen anything like it. Any other questions?
Not a question, I'll just comment. It's not part of our bailiwick, but some of you also may have seen that the #1 women's tennis player in the world, who is only 25 years old, called it quits and retired day before yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's certainly boomers, but everybody is kind of relooking at their professional and employment and career situation. So, there's a lot of competition out there for talented people.
Yeah. And just to be brutally honest, I mean, there's always some chance we won't find a candidate that we're happy with, and we might even have to go out a second time. I mean, so, we need to be geared that it's a candidate. It's kind of like, who's got the advantage, the house buyer or the house seller? And it's been the house seller for quite a while. And I think for recruitments right now, it's the candidates got the edge. There aren't as many candidates and there are a lot of people looking. So I think we need to realize that we may have difficult decisions to make as well. Hopefully that won't be the case and we'll have someone wonderful and it'll work out perfectly, but remains to be seen. So, but again, I think we have a very good firm that we'll be working with, and I think I think in particular the library expert that they have involved will probably be one of the people that the trustees will interface. And our sense from some of the reference checks is that may be a very fine experience for all of us. So I'm looking forward to that. So if no other questions, I guess I should ask Francesca to see if there's any public input on this item. There's no action required, but still we should offer public comment. You're muted, Francesca.
To make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Then if nothing else on that item, let's move on to item number 5, which is to receive a quarterly report on library director's work plan. Inga, is there anything you'd like to highlight?
Well, I'd just like to remind us all that the work plan for 2022 was adopted in December. And so this is the first quarterly report for this new work plan. Typically, you would be receiving it in April to give the full 3 months of activities to report on. But we realized that it would be productive to have me give 2 of these reports, this one and then one closer to July. So we decided to move it up a little bit. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You can always ask me about anything I've omitted to say, what's happening on that front. But one thing that I did have a little bit of an update on, in addition to what I've reported on, is that with the Mobac shared catalog, we had a admin council meeting on Friday of last week, and I chaired that meeting. And we had interest from the new library director in Santa Cruz, and she's interested in Koha, so that was exciting. And we decided that I'm just going to go ahead and call a meeting of this group, because there hasn't been a whole lot of movement because of COVID and everything. I'll call a meeting of the group and we'll see if we can kind of get this project moving forward again. And just as a reminder, this is an opportunity for those libraries that have an instance of Koha, that they use Koha as their catalog and their circulation system and so forth, to combine their catalogs just as Pacific Grove and Monterey are combined, so that customers can have a more seamless process when they're borrowing materials regionally. And this week, the county library system just switched over to Koha. So, and Carmel and Salinas are both Koha libraries. And then we have some in further away that are Koha libraries. So what this could mean is that the size of our collection that's available to a customer could jump dramatically if we all were sharing one instance of a catalog. So it's exciting, and there might be some staffing benefits as well, just in that we wouldn't all need to have the same experts on our staff. So there might be some savings realized that way. And there might even be some revenue generation if one of the libraries has a really specialist that others will pay to have them do something. So, and in our, not to be too vague, in our instance, I would think that somebody like David, who has such extensive knowledge about what's under the hood with Koha and can make it do all kinds of amazing things, that's the kind of service folks might want to chip in a little bit more to have an expert like that helping with their catalog. But of course, that all remains to be seen. At this point, we have the city attorney from one of the libraries drafted what an agreement could look like, and now we're going to sort of look at that and compare it to what some other consortia, Koha consortias have as agreements, and go from there. So that's exciting.
Okay, very good. Any trustee questions for Inga on the work plan? Marcia.
Yeah, I had a couple, but I also just wanted a clarification on the Koha piece. So you have both the shared catalog and some sort of truck that has to go around and deliver the things, right?
So we already do. Yeah, we pay, each library pays into a courier service. And so right now we pay an extra $1,000 a year to have the courier deliver 5 days a week, though we're not fully utilizing that yet, between Pacific Grove and Monterey.
Right. So this would also go Santa Cruz, and it would go to the other county libraries.
And so as part of our fee belonging to the Pacific Library Partnership, we get courier service to Santa Cruz, to the county libraries, to Carmel. It's just, I think, once a week that our materials go to those other libraries and vice versa. So that's part of the, when we are looking at, possible costs and so forth, that's one of the things, is how frequently would we need to increase delivery with a slight increase in cost.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so on page 23, I guess it's the first page, under digital strategy, which is towards the bottom.
Yes.
The last sentence says, "We are replacement equipment." So I'm not sure what that means.
Is that we are looking for replacement equipment or
Or
something?
we are replacing equipment, I don't know, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. So let's see.
No, you're a replacement, Marcia.
Oh.
She's not equipment though.
So are we looking at back at page 23?
23,
Page
the
23,
next to the last paragraph.
It's the bottom where it says RFID.
And then,
The last sentence in 2A.
Says we are replacement equipment. What did you mean by that?
oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. So so I was editing that and I guess I didn't finish it. So we're looking at replacement equipment.
Okay.
Because our lease is ending with the current self-checks that we have, that we're locked into this lease. And so we're looking at the costs of replacing those self-checks with something more reasonable and more streamlined. Sorry.
Did you have another question, Marcia?
No, it was on the work plan. So no, I think that was the only question I have on this.
Okay, then I think Bob had a question.
Yeah. Oh, quick question back. I was trying to sneak in before Marcia shifted to the RFID topic, but talking about Koha, what is the long-term obligation of a library that signs up and joins Koha and after some length of time says, "No, I don't really want to stay. I want to, leave the consortium or back out." What's the obligation? How long do they have to stay before they can choose to leave?
That's a good question. So first, I just want to say we already are Koha library. So we have the instance of the software Koha already, and we will continue that. But then we haven't identified the name of this Mobac consortium of Koha libraries. And I would think, and Jim knowing more about sort of consortial agreements between jurisdictions might want to say something, but I would think that would need to be something that's looked at in the agreement. Like, would we say, if you're going to join us, you got to stick it out for a certain number of years? Because of course, then it does change the pricing model for all of us when we've pooled our resources. Like right now, for instance, we pay a fee to Bywater, which is a firm that supports the Koha software. And then Pacific Grove does as well. And Carmel does as well. And the county library does also. But if we formalize into this larger consortia, we'll get a new pricing from that company, Bywater. And if somebody suddenly pulled out, like the county with a huge 500,000 items in their collection, that might have a big impact on what our costs are. So I would think that there would need to be something like that built into the agreement.
Yeah, in other contracts I've seen that might have a little bit of similarity to it. I've seen a couple of approaches. One would be, each one will stay in a minimum amount of time, whatever, and that could be negotiated. Another way is that if to leave, to stop participating, you need to give X amount of notice. Like I've seen it up to a year or more for example, where we've merged fire departments. If one city withdrew from that, they need to give, I think it's a year notice of that kind of thing. So there are several different ways you can do that. And it can also be done as a contract or as a joint power authority. Joint powers authority tend to be more complicated, so I'm not sure this would necessitate that. But again, I'm sure whatever attorney is working on it will think about various ways it could be structured. But I would hope it wouldn't need to be a JPA, because those do usually have a lot more complexity to them. Bob.
Yeah, my curiosity was only prompted by the one thing that I could think is a potential downside to all of this, which is, while joining the consortium means that our regular customers have a larger number of items from which to choose and check out and read and everything, it works both ways. And that means there will be thousands more people who will have access to our resources and our collection. And over time, we would see whether, the people whom we are here to serve first and foremost, namely Monterey city residents, are getting the short end of the stick. And, only time would tell that. And that's the only thing I could think that would be a downside to this. And so that's just what prompted my curiosity about, well, what if we were doing this for a year and we said, hey, geez, we're getting complaints from all of our patrons, our local patrons, that say, I can't get a book because it's been shipped off to Santa Cruz or who knows where now. What would it take to get out if we wanted to? And I can understand why we don't know for sure right now. It's a negotiable thing. Getting off of that topic, I had a number of items in this work plan that I found interesting and highlighted, but the one in particular that I want to ask about, the very first paragraph about staffing reorganization. This is on packet page 23 under organizational excellence, and it talks about staffing reorganization, and it refers to several positions that we hope are funded. And the last sentence says, these positions are pivotal in providing core services. And by core services, I think that means the ones we consider most and absolutely necessary. But then when I drop down in the report to packet page 25, and under staffing reorganization again, the third key result is that the library is, quote, effectively staffed to provide high priority, which I would say is a synonym for core services. So are we staffed adequately or aren't we? It seems to me like staffing is maybe the most important issue that we have as we're emerging from the staff reduction and the reduction in services accordingly. And this last sentence says we're effectively staffed to provide core services, but then above it, it says, in effect, we need to get these other positions in order to provide core services. So that's where I'm confused.
Okay, so the work plan is, a bunch of things need to happen, and then we would know that they had happened. A result of them happening would be that this goal is met. And so if we successfully complete our reorganization, a key result will be we are adequately staffed to provide our priority services. So moving toward, so that's what, so you're reading first, secondly, page 25 is the plan I presented to you. And so then the previous page you read from is where we are in terms of achieving that plan. And so where we are in terms of getting adequately staffed is that the new list of staffing needs has been folded into our phased plan. And now we're waiting to see if those are funded. Does that make sense?
Sort of, but the sentence on page 25 then really is a statement of what we hope to accomplish. And I guess I would have preferred it, instead of saying is, maybe it should have said the library will be leaner but effectively staffed, making it a statement of a future accomplishment rather than a statement of something that is, because I don't know that we would say it is yet. And especially since earlier on page 23, it says more or less, we need these new positions in order to accomplish providing high priority services while at the same time being leaner. So the verb is what made me think you were talking about something that is rather than something we hope to be.
Yeah, I can see how that's confusing. I guess the way the plan was drafted, it was sort of like, these are what we want to do. And then how are we going to know if we've done those things? What would that new world look like? And then those are is statements,
Since you said, how will we know? Let me just go down a couple more lines to the last one about staff are motivated. I guess you're saying staff will be seen as motivated or will report being motivated or something and have a means to measure performance as a result. And it's not necessarily are unless we've already determined that. So I guess my question is, how are we going to know that? The same way, how will we know the is in the earlier question?
I guess, we do those staff surveys and we would say, are you motivated?
Okay.
And do you feel, so I guess, this is a good question. It sort of goes back though to, do we need to revisit the plan, and is the plan written in a way that makes sense? Because what I was reporting on is the progress on the plan, but then it seems like the plan itself is causing some confusion. So,
Yeah, Inga, can you remind us, the plan was actually adopted last year, in November?
December, at the December meeting.
December, yeah. So she's just attaching a report that we approved last December. And I think it wasn't totally clear that when your current report ended and attachment began. So I think that may be part of the confusion. I had a little confusion there too until I realized that they're two totally different documents done at different times. So, but Marcia, I think you wanted to add something.
But no, I was confused because it looks to me, Bob, like every one of the key results uses the word is as the one you pointed out. I mean, if you go on, every single one of them says, you know, under revenue generation, MPL is compensated for staff expertise. Potential cost is understood. And so, you know, I think either it works this way or she changes the whole thing. But if this is a past, and I had some other comments on the plan, but if the plan has already been adopted.
Right. You adopted this plan.
Yeah,
for
if we
me to
approved it already and didn't question it, I'm not sure, you know, for example, you have continuous improvement under finance adjustments, and I'm not sure why, but the fact is that this is a historic document and not a document, I guess, to be amended and changed now, right? It's a historic document.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it. Mary Jane, it looked like you wanted to contribute to the discussion.
I just wanted to say that I think that if we can send ourselves back in time to last December, when plans like these are written and it says key result, I think we want to fill in the blank, you know, what will success look like? It will be a key result that will be like this. So I think if you can just do a little time travel, it will make sense.
Right. Right.
Other questions for Inga? Harish?
Yes. Some meetings ago, I remember there was a mention of STEM initiative. Is that folded in one of these objectives, or is that something separate?
So one of the objectives in our children's programming, when we wrote our children's programming goals several years ago, was to provide STEM programming. So STEM is already folded into, when we talk about children and learning opportunities and so forth, STEM is part of that.
Other questions?
Excuse me while I go inside.
Okay, thank you.
Other trustee questions before we go to public input, public comment? I had one question, Inga, on under digital strategy in the work plan. Yeah, in the work plan, did number 2A on packet page 27, there's that item about exploring automated materials handling.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that we have the RFID somewhat under control now. And at least I'm hoping that's the case. And except maybe for the patron app to do a little bit more on that perhaps. But anyway, I was wondering if at this point you had any thoughts about that. The AMH, the kind of phase 2 issue that we talked about a while back.
Right. So I had some preliminary discussions with FE Technologies, and they were sort of like, oh, you don't really, maybe you're really not big enough to do materials handling. AHD might not be that great for you. But I agree that it would sort of be good to put that to rest, to find out more from them, or also another firm, like, you know, because previously it seemed like we were getting pretty compelling arguments that it would be beneficial for us to look into automated materials handling.
Okay.
But I should say something about the patron app. We have it now front and center on our homepage with a link to a video. And we also have signage posted in the building that says, oh, you know, do you want to do contactless checkout? Try the patron app. And so hopefully by signage and then also by promotion front and center on our website, we're getting some more usage. We'll see how the statistics look.
Good, good. Okay, if no other questions for now, Bob, go ahead.
Just one real quick one. In the RFID paragraph, and we asked about we are replacement equipment. What does that mean? It means we're seeking replacement equipment. And I guess unless it's costing us too much money, why? Because I think the checkout equipment we have, those 2 units, next to where the help desk is are fantastic. I just don't understand what are the problems with those two.
Right, so we're leasing, Kim can chime in if she can remember it all, but anyway, we're leasing that equipment from Biblioteca, and the lease agreement is coming to a close. They're not able to update the version of Windows to the latest version of Windows. So ISD is allowing us to continue to use this equipment, but they are adamant that we have to move to equipment that has the latest version of Windows, and they're exceedingly expensive. So now, because we started the contract 5 years ago, I believe, now you can just buy outright for, I believe it's about $3,000 each, self-checks that you just then own outright, and you have a maintenance contract on them. These we are leasing for $1,100 a month, and so we're looking forward to ending our lease agreement. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, and I was just going to say the great thing now is that since we switched to RFID, there's many, many more options for self-checks now. When we previously signed the lease for our current ones, we were very limited. There's essentially only one choice for what we could try to work with. So we'll have a lot more options available when we go back out for buying or leasing or whatever we decide is most financially the best idea.
Thank you.
Okay, if no other questions for now, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 5?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Then further comments from the trustees. I know I have one, but before I make mine, does anybody else have comments they'd like to make? The one that I have is actually a suggestion that perhaps something be, in a sense, added to the work plan because of the unique circumstances that we're facing. I have suggested to Inga that I think it would be helpful for her to work on a transition plan, something that a new library director, if it was someone from the outside, would find useful in terms of just various things, calendar things, people to know, just a whole series of things that someone coming in from the outside might find useful. And I know I've done that sort of thing in previous positions and asked department heads to do it in previous positions, and it takes a little while to do a good job of that, but it can be very helpful for a new person coming in, I think. So I just wanted to see if Inga is amenable to considering that part of the work plan for the next 3 or 4 months, and see if any of the other board members have other comments related to that. Maybe start with Inga. Did you have any reaction to that?
So I've already started one because we have talked about this. And so I would be happy to have that on the work plan since I'm working on it. Yeah.
Good. Very good. Any other trustees have a comment on that or anything else for that matter on the work? Marshall.
I think it's really important to have that, also projects underway and pending, people who are waiting for a response to something, those kinds of things, so that somebody doesn't walk in and just not know about the minefields that are out there. So, and upcoming events and deadlines and all those kinds of things. I think it's really critically important for their success.
Good. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much for the work plan and for actually giving us an additional one before you retire. That I know it takes a fair amount of work to put these together. So thank you, Inga.
Thank you.
If nothing, I think we did ask for public input on that, didn't we? Yes. Okay, good. Moving on then to item number 6, to receive an update on the annual budget process and provide direction to staff. There may not be a whole lot new that's happened since our meeting, but we thought it would be useful to put it on the agenda just in case anything had come up that needs any discussion. So Inga, is there anything new that's come up?
Unfortunately, there isn't anything new. And if Nat were here, we could try to get him to tell us something new. But at this point, I've submitted the information that needs to be submitted, and I'm just waiting for the opportunity to defend our request to in a budget hearing, and to find out which parts of our requests will be moved forward by a city manager and which parts might not. And at that point, then I will proceed as directed last time, which is I'll start with the chair and vice chair and share what I've learned, and then we'll go from there on what next steps need to happen.
Okay. Any questions for Inga? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 6?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or discussion on this item?
Sorry, I did think of one thing, which is in a kind of an offhand, I was having a discussion with our city manager about something else, and then he does think of the museums and the library as one unit. We are one department. Museums is a division. And so in arguing for museums needs, he implied that, well, then the library might not get all of its needs met. And so I thought I should probably share that as a heads up, that of course, all the different departments are making requests. All the requests won't be honored, but sort of that's an interesting twist in our agreeing to help out with overseeing museums, is that it could be then, if we get a position, right now we have no regular full-time or part-time positions in museums. If we get one, then we might not get one of the library positions. So that's a bit of a concern.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think to some degree that's the nature of the beast. But I appreciate your mentioning that. And as far as I'm concerned, you just need to make your professional recommendation if asked to prioritize between museums and library. You just have to make your professional recommendation on that.
Thank you.
Any other comments on item number 6 before we move on? If not, then item number 7 is the first reading of proposed revisions to Library Board Policies 145 on document delivery and 425 on reproduction and use of archival materials. Inga, since this is a first reading, could you give us a little bit of background on this?
Sure, and I'm glad Kim is here because Kim and Sean went through both of these policies and made their recommendations to me, and then I've incorporated them into recommendations for you. But essentially, the policy 145, which is for document delivery, refers to charges for providing reproductions of materials when the library customer is not able to come into the library to visit in person. And we hadn't looked at that policy for quite some time. And there were some questions about the charges that were on there, and we don't have the old arguments for why some of those charges are there. So we looked at, through trying to use an equity lens, trying to think about, are we creating a barrier for people by charging some of these fees if they're incarcerated or if they are homebound? And so we reduced some of those charges, and then we removed some things that were referenced, outdated technology like fax machines. We don't actually have a fax machine at the library anymore. Then for Library Board Policy 425, reproduction use of archival materials, we looked at the policies, and when I say we, it was Sean and Kim, looked at, and primarily Sean, looked at the policies for this table of institutions in our area, and then also just some big institutions like what does Los Angeles Public Library do, and then one of our peer libraries, what does Los Gatos do? So in terms of how much do they charge, and do they distinguish between different sorts of entities, whether somebody's like, oh my gosh, you have a photograph of my dad, can I get a copy of that? Do we charge the same for somebody who says, I'm publishing a book on fisheries and I want to use this photograph of that same individual for my publication? So it turns out that a lot of libraries do distinguish between personal research use versus use for commercial purposes. So in our revisions to that policy, that's one of the things that we're proposing be implemented as well, is that we actually change that fee structure. And then I also attached Library Board Policy 140, not because we're making any changes to it, but because it's referenced in Library Board Policy 145, which we are changing. So I just thought, since we're referencing it, you'd want to see it so that you don't have to then look that up. So that's all I have to say as a matter of introduction. And then Kim, if you want to say any further comments about what thinking went into it, or we can just see what questions trustees have.
I think we're pretty much ready for questions right now. I think when we were looking at this, we were trying to look at it through a lens for equity and making things available to the general public without charging fees, like a processing fee where there's not a particular way that we're accounting for where that processing fee is being calculated. Because when we're answering questions at the reference desk, we're not counting how many minutes we take. So why should there be a fee for if we're responding to somebody via mail or pulling something from the history room? So.
Okay, thank you. Trustee, questions on either of these policies? Bob?
One question, just to make sure I'm reading this correctly. In the very beginning of this whole agenda item, am I correct that the average revenue is only a little over $600 a year historically? That we're talking about, figuring out what's going to cost what, but historically, I think it said it was $606 a year is all we're talking about.
So it's interesting because that's the average from 2016 to 2019. Prior to that period, there were years when our revenue was as much as $2,000. So without doing a deep investigation of, were we doing some special project? Was there some special researcher that helped generate that level? I think there's just been a pretty significant shift in a number of factors. One is there's so many more historic images are available online. And if you're a kid doing a report and you need an image of a fishing boat, you don't necessarily have to come to the Monterey Public Library and pay to get that image. And so there's a lot of sort of good enough, close enough, this will do for my project kinds of things that happen where you can just get freely online images. And then there is also the growth in people using their phones. That is an important thing that I forgot to mention in policy 425. We had said previously, you can't bring in your personal scanner and your personal scanning device. But as long as a person isn't using a flash, just to take a picture of something they're seeing in a research facility, we're thinking now is permissible. And it's actually, people do that without realizing they should have asked us if that's okay. So there's been this interesting shift in technology, which means then there isn't the same revenue generated by having historic photos.
Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking, that there's just so much more available and so many more ways to have access to these kinds of materials that it really, in many cases, makes it unnecessary to go to the library. I was just also wondering, almost with tongue in cheek, you were saying, well, somebody calls up and says, well, I see you have a picture of my great uncle who was a fisherman 3 generations ago. I need a picture of it. And we're doing this for people that are homebound and have trouble getting to the library. Yet that person would have to have made it to the library in order to know we had a picture there that they might want to have. So I was trying to figure out how that would work out. But I think, I think the trend will not be to go back up to filling a lot of these requests for the reasons that you just mentioned, the availability of these kinds of materials now. And I really don't think we should spend tons of time to worry about, $600.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Then Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 7?
Yes, to make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, any other, this is just the first reading. It'll come back next month for the second reading and adoption, but any other comments or any suggested changes to either of these policies?
I just had one question, and that is it's sort of the wisdom of putting the dollar figures in the policy, which means that, if there's tremendous inflation and you have to raise the cost of a page from 10 cents to 15 cents, do we have to go back to the board and redo the whole policy, or could you call it an appendix or something with the so we could change that? I don't know. If you think if it's just a number, maybe the numbers should be set up in some way that you can pass the policy. The policy doesn't change, but the numbers could change more easily. I don't know. That's just
I've seen things done like that where you might use a CPI index or something like that, but we're talking about such small numbers that, if you used a CPI on 10 cents,
yeah.
You may want to leave it more, in more coherent increments, I think, than going to 11.2 cents or some weird thing like that a CPA might lead you to. But I know that's just my sense of it.
This might cause us to leave the amounts the same for the next 20 years.
So that's a very interesting question, because the city also has a fee schedule, and that fee schedule is adopted every year by the city council. And then throughout the year, different departments come back to the council to amend that schedule. And I was looking at how we've listed things in the fee schedule to see if any of these changes were then going to trigger having to go to council to get 10 cents changed to 25 cents or whatever. And for archival processing, I think there's some kind of language that's used that says something like to be set by the library director or something like that. So there is a way of phrasing it where you could then not build it directly into the policy, but say that it's set by the director based on something or other. And so I could look into that more for you and then propose that as an alternative so that we're not locking ourselves into having to specify small amounts.
Well, maybe it's for future thought for the next time. It's just something to consider. I think we're down the road now and we should just finish up what we started.
Okay, any other comments or suggestions?
I think it's a good point, but the question then is, are the numbers that we're going to leave in there now, if we approve this after the second reading, adequate for covering current expenses that we incur when we provide these services?
Inga or Kim want to respond to that?
I think Kim was saying that they're not directly correlated to the cost of providing that service. So, and as an example, when we answer the phone and have a reference question that then we work on, we don't charge the customer a fee to work on that question. And so when we make these reproductions for somebody, we're actually not recouping the cost of the staff time and the supplies.
Yeah, I think the other side of that is the city can't charge a fee that is more expensive than the cost incurred by the city. So there is that balancing act too, that in most cases, you can't charge more than it actually costs you to a customer. Any other comments or suggestions? If not, then I think we're ready to move on to the informational reports and staff comments section of the agenda, which today is item 8 through 12. And Inga, some of these items in the past, we might have put under public appearance, but Inga and I talked about it a little bit with Jennifer, and we thought it made sense, since some of these are basically informational reports, to move them to this category of the agenda. So if anybody has any comments about that, just in terms of the structure of our agenda, feel free to let us know. But otherwise, we thought this made a little more sense, because most of these are just informational reports. If nobody has any comment on that at this point, why don't we move on to item number 8, which is the first of the informational reports, and that's a report on Monterey County Gives campaign and the chocolate and wine benefit update, both of which were quite successful. So congratulations, Inga and Mary Jane and everyone else involved.
Thank
Thank
you, everyone
you.
who was involved.
Yes, and we really appreciated all of the support from the board on both of these. And I'll introduce it, and then I'll turn it over to Mary Jane, because Mary Jane really is the star behind this. And I know that she likes to share accolades around, but really it's just so tremendous how much we've been able to raise once she joined us and helped guide us with her professional expertise. And I think before the meeting started, we were talking a little bit about how she is going to be retiring. And but I just wanted to publicly say how deeply, deeply grateful we are to have had her working with us during the time that she's been here. I know it's her childhood library, so she's passionate about the Monterey Public Library. And I think that really comes across in the tremendous work that she's done, in addition to just the expertise that she brought with her and the kindness and support. So it's been wonderful working with her, and we have her in through the fiscal year. So thank you, Mary Jane. And if you can just walk us through the report.
I'm glad to, and thanks for those really generous comments. Not many people get to have this last little coda to their professional life that they didn't plan, that is at the heart of where I started and where I grew up, and literally blocks from where the house I grew up in. So it's been very special in many ways. So yeah, MC Gives. The idea that we were funding, as all of you know, was described earlier in the board packet on packet page 24, where Inga discussed in her work plan some of the focusing on social and emotional learning programs that are being put together for kids, teens, and families. So it's great to see the work already beginning. I guess I'll just comment on a couple things that aren't explicitly really written down here. We raised over 25% more than last year, and once the matching funds were included in what we raised, the grand total was over 31% more than we had raised in toto with the match last year. Overall, the match this year for all of the participating organizations was bigger than it had been last year. I don't really know the number last year, but the match for the campaign was 14.27% of what was raised by all of MC Gives, all of the participating nonprofits. I mentioned fees in a couple of places, and I just thought I would describe briefly how extremely reasonable these fees are. On our, they say that MC Gives says that 2.56% is charged on total gifts. For us, it was actually 2.29%. So I is a little less than that, or $1,523.37 were our fees. So that came out of the total before our check was written, and our check was written for north of $66,000. So you can see how, this is really just such a great community project. It seems so productive. It seems so, it really knits the community together, at least for everyone lucky enough to be under the umbrella. It's really a unique program in my experience, and pretty wonderful. The fees, include the credit card fee and a very small 1.18% administrative fee from that the Community Foundation takes for booking all these gifts. So I just thought I would tell you a little bit about the fees, since I sort of gloss over those, but just to reassure you that they are really very tiny. And I'll just pop over into chocolate and wine now. And if anyone has any questions afterwards about either of these, Bob, it looks like Bob had a question, but I'll just plunge in.
I'll hold it till later. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Not a question, but a comment. I'll hold it till later.
Okay. Really, chocolate and wine surprised us all, I think, that we sold out the afternoon before the event. We sold the last of the party bags, that we were able to double the number of bags and wines. It required tripling the number of contributing bakeries and bakers, that so many new people were attracted. We think around 25% were first-time participants. And also that we raised the price point. When I say we, there was a chocolate and wine committee, and then there was a core group that met many Mondays that involved Diane, co-chair Rebecca Perry, Inga, who could make almost all the meetings, and me. And just I'll say as an aside, because events weren't really why I was brought in to work on fund development, I did the lion's share of my work on chocolate and wine kind of as a volunteer, because without tracking those hours, because my hours would have been used up really quickly then. So to have found people with really only one or two exceptions, not having balked at the price points, and it was just a great success, and we seem to have nailed it with selling out the day before. The only other comment I wanted to make is that I had promised Diane, who's been out of town with a family wedding, that I would express her gratitude for the contributions that all of you made to the wines that enabled us to fill all of those bags, and your participation on the day of the event. It was really fun to see those of you who drove in and picked up your bags, or walked in the case of Marcia and Ken. So that's all I have.
Okay, very good. Questions about either of these events or the report? Bob, did you have something?
Well, not a question. I just a comment, because I was looking at the Monterey County Gives chart, and if you look at the total number of gifts from last year to this year, it's almost the same number, 173, 177. And one could look at that and say, well, geez, we didn't really increase the number of people who were interested in donating to the library. It was the same number of people, yet the total dollar value of those gifts is about $12,000 more. And when you do a little arithmetic, it turns out that roughly the same number of people, not necessarily the same people, because you don't know if the 173 are the exact same people in the 177, but the same number of people donated more this past year than in 2020. And in fact, I did a little arithmetic, 22% more per gift. So it's like, well, we have the same number of supporters, but they're supporting us 22% more than they did before. And I'm not exactly sure what that means, except to say that it's nice that people are giving more. It would also be nice if we had more people giving.
I have a comment, actually. I don't have an exact model, but when I participated in the wrap-up meeting for all the participating organizations, the overall increase in funds was again pretty dramatic for the whole county. And the number of donors wasn't very much larger. So that I'll just point that out as a fact. I'll also say that with any fundraising program, it's sort of the ideal that you always are at least replenishing your donors and increasing them a little, but getting those dollar gifts to have more zeros at the end of them is part of what building a major gifts program looks like. And it's so it's devoutly to be wished to have that bottom line.
Well, slightly in contrast, the report on the chocolate and wine, as you pointed out verbally, there were a significant number of people who were new donors or ones who had not donated for a number of years. And so, you know, that we made a lot of money and we increased the number of new donors significantly there. And if I'm reading the chart right, please correct me if I'm wrong, just simply subtracting total expenses from total revenue, the net was about $25,000. And, you know, which I think is noticeably more than the net from chocolate and wine before, even with all of the, not to belittle the amount of work that went into it this year, but putting on that in-person thing with the live auction and the silent auction and everything. I mean, it's a lot of it's volunteer work and we're thankful for that, but it's much more time consuming than even this was. So maybe some kind of hybrid
and
of those
no. I would say yes and no. And Inga, I'm not sure you and I've talked about this, but Diane and I know that the handling chocolate and wine as we did this last year put a enormous, disproportionately high load on a couple of people. Diane, Rebecca, and to a lesser extent myself and Inga. So the work definitely gets spread out among participants more for the in-person model. Also, I think characteristic this year is we did really pretty aggressive marketing in the weekly and with the postcard, and we found sponsorship gifts to cover that, but that helped bring in the new people.
Very good.
So I wanted to make a comment about your first comment, Bob, which was the amount raised with for MC Gives with a similar number of donors. And you'll notice that we did increase the challenge gift. So I think one of the great things that we did this year was we looked at previous donors and we increased the number of people that we talked to about, oh, we see you've been so generous in the past with MC Gives. Would you be willing to make a challenge gift and then explain what that was about? And so that was kind of a stretch gift in a way. And so that's how you kind of incrementally can move people up from one level to the next level. And then I think it really did pay off in seeing how much had been raised from the challenge gifts. And then I would say chocolate and wine, it's true that it was a ton of work for fewer number of people, but I was happy that I was able to leave the library before midnight. Which, in all the live talk
Yeah.
lines, I've always been there to the end, taking out the trash. And that's one thing about a virtual event that I didn't have to do. So
No furniture was moved in the creation of this event.
exactly. So
Just the bookmobile, right?
Right. That's true.
Okay, other questions or comments? Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 8?
Yes. To make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, other general trustee comments on this item before we move on? If not, I do have 2 comments. One, I wanted to echo Inga's compliments and thanks to Mary Jane. She has, I think you were originally going to work with us for, what was it, 6 months, about 2.5 years ago, or 3 months?
2.5 or 3 months, and Inga gave me 3 things to do. And then till the position was filled.
Well, we're so glad that you've stayed with us and you're going to be with us a bit longer, and then still maybe be able to help out even after that. So thank you so much. You've done a great job.
My great pleasure. Thanks.
And similarly, I also wanted to extend thanks to the Friends and Foundation, to Diane in particular, and the people on that committee and the entire Friends and Foundation. I think are continuing to do a great job, and we certainly want to make sure that they feel appreciated as well, because they've done. I know you'll be having a report, I think, in a little bit on the overall campaign. That's yet to come, right?
Maybe next. Today, are we going to talk? I can say something today, but I don't know what we're doing.
Well, I didn't know if you were going to have. I got the sense there was going to be some publicity about the overall campaign over the last 2 years.
Right.
And
we're just getting it together. A display will go up tomorrow in the foyer, and we're putting the finishing touches to slightly exaggerate the progress on a press release. But if you want to make a few comments about that, that would certainly be appropriate, I think. And if you're not ready to, that's fine too. Don't worry about it. I just hate to repeat myself when I'm going to say something later on, but I think.
Oh, okay.
I meant at a subsequent meeting. Inga,
okay, no, that's fine. We can wait.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay, so I think, and also in April when we do our trust fund quarterly report and kind of report on what the fund development coordinator has been up to, that will be a great opportunity for for us to share what a resounding success this 18-month campaign has been.
Yes. Okay, very good. Well, if nothing else on that item, then let's move on to item number 9, which is to receive a quarterly museums and cultural arts activities report, which is basically the 3 monthly reports to the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission. But anything you'd like to highlight in particular, Inga?
I just want to highlight that. So November, December, January is a little bit of a slower period for museums. Traditionally, it's gearing up for Christmas in the Adobes and then recovering from Christmas in the Adobes. And I have shared this before, but and it comes out when you read these reports, but Francesca, in her new role as admin support to museums, just really launched into it and gave 100%, supporting Jordan in making it a really tremendous success. So huge thank you to Francesca. And that was sort of the big highlight of the November, December, January report.
Okay, good. Any questions from the trustees? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 9?
Yes, to make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, any other discussion on this item? Well, again, thank you to Francesca and all the volunteers that are involved as well, and the other staff in the Christmas in the Adobes. That's always a wonderful event.
Thank you.
Moving on then to item 10, to receive a quarterly library activity report. Anything you'd like to highlight there, Inga?
There were a couple of things that I thought I would point out. So one is, of course, we mentioned on packet page 56 just how successful the adult history programs have been. And they're so successful, we're actually having one right now as our board meeting is taking place. But it is being recorded, and everybody will be able to watch it on our YouTube channel. It's about the Buffalo Soldiers. And Kim, do you remember I asked Sean this morning how many people had signed up? 100 and
He was at like around 150, 140, 150 as of like this morning.
right, and that just shows how continuing with virtual programs, which is what we're planning to do with adult programming, even as we reopen our meeting rooms in the new fiscal year, is a good idea, because we're able to have more people attend our programs than we're able to do when our community room is open, because the maximum capacity there is 90 people, and you can only fit the chairs in such a way that they're not facing the screen. So if you were planning to have a presenter show something on the projector on the screen, you have to lug in all of that equipment, which then takes up space, which means you have fewer people in the audience. So anyway, there are lots of things that are solved by being able to do these virtual programs, and also having presenters like today's presenter isn't in the area. We didn't have to pay for any travel costs, didn't have to put the person up anywhere. So anyway, they've been really successful. The other thing that I wanted to mention or just highlight was on packet page 57 up at the top, and we're under community outreach. So Peggy Langford represented the library at the Bayview Charter Schools Reading Festival, and also she welcomed right below that San Carlos School kindergartners. And we're just so lucky to have an on-call like Peggy Langford working for us several hours a week, because that's the kind of thing that your children's librarian does. Your children's librarian builds those relationships with the local schools, so that when a child comes into the library with their parents, they come running over to the desk and they say, "There's Peggy, there's Miss Peggy," or whatever. You know, they sort of build this rapport that then follows the child as the child grows up. And when you don't have a consistent youth librarian there, you don't have that kind of development of a positive association of good experiences with your school, and then good experiences here in the library. So we're lucky to have Peggy around. And they actually did videotape, and I stumbled across it on the internet, this Bayview Charter School Reading Festival, and it looked like a lot of fun. There were lots of kids, lots of parents, and people like Peggy were reading to kids, and kids were having the opportunity to get books and so forth. So we're really grateful to be able to be part of those kinds of programs with schools.
The library will be closing in 30 minutes.
And I don't think I had anything else that I wanted to particularly point out, but Kim might, since she put the report together.
Nope. Okay. Any trustee comments or questions for either Inga or Kim? Bob.
Just educate me on packet page 57. It talks about Sarah updating volunteer records, and it says to ensure volunteers have completed target solution assignments. What is a target solution assignment?
So the city has requirements, just as the city requires boards and commissions to take these online courses that have to do with anti-harassment and anti-bullying. And that requirement has been extended now to volunteers as well, so that all of the volunteers who work for the library and also for museums are required to take or to complete this mandatory training. And that sounds really easy. It's like, oh yeah, sure, everybody's agreed to be a volunteer. They can just do the little training, but each person has a different situation with their internet connection, with their technology, with their email address. And it's all time sensitive, like you're sent a password that you have to respond within 48 hours. And if you miss it, then it has to be done again, sent out again to you. I mean, it's turned out to be very complicated. And she's even held sessions in the library trying to invite people who don't have the right technology at home to come in to do that. And we've lost some volunteers just because of that hurdle of having to complete that. So kudos to Sarah for really being persistent and trying to help everybody do the necessary training.
Thank you. I just didn't know what target solution assignment, what that referred to.
Yep, it's anti-harassment, anti-bullying.
And at the ethics one too?
Kim?
No, it's not ethics. So it's anti-harassment, and then they had and then the city's actual policy about harassment, and then they had a COVID tutorial about being safe during COVID. So sometimes they throw in extra stuff like that.
Yeah, the trustees are required to do some additional things like the Brown Act and some that I'm sure you remember that regular volunteers aren't required to do. So we get a little, I think we have everything that they have plus a few more. Okay, any other questions or comments on that? I don't think I've asked for public input yet. Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 10?
It looked like Marcia wanted to make a comment. Do we take that first?
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry, Marcia, I didn't.
No, I was just struck by a few names like Francesca and Sarah Nolan appearing over and over and over again. And I was thinking how lucky we are to be able to accomplish so much with so few, that this library is doing some amazing things, and we're so thin in personnel. So we're very appreciative of the contributions of the few of you to make it look like we have so many employees.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah,
Well said.
and just to comment on that, Marcia, I know that the board has been concerned about cross-training, and I believe it's in this report that we say not only, or maybe it'll be in our next report, not only did Sarah Nolan, who is adult programming librarian, take a training on providing story times, but she in fact did our story time for St. Patrick's Day, and reports from parents and also from other staff were that she did an outstanding job. So people really are doing their cross training and stretching, and I think it mentioned in here that Francesca's been learning about permitting for museums for use of their facilities and so forth. So people are learning and growing and taking on new things. So we really appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Now, could we see if there's any public comment on item number 10?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Any other comments on this item? If not, let's move on to item number 11, which is to receive the financial report. Any particular highlights there, Inga?
I didn't have anything to highlight, but I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, trustee questions. I have one question, which is on the library trust fund. The amended budget, I don't think has been amended yet, has it?
Correct, because this is.
They just approved it too recently, but it will be amended hopefully soon, right?
Yes, we have.
Maybe next month. Yeah. Okay.
Right. That was one of the things that jumped out at me. I probably should have just mentioned that it hasn't gone into effect yet, is my understanding.
Well, I think it would have gone into effect, but it may not have gotten into the books yet. Who knows?
Right.
Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments? Francesca, any public comment on item number 11?
To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Thank you. Item 12 then is to receive the statistical report. Anything you wanted to highlight there, Inga?
Yes, so I did want to point out that starting next month, we will be comparing we'll be comparing our month in 2022 to the equivalent month in 2019. And that is because starting next month, the numbers that are reported to compare to this year, if we're just looking at last year, it's not a good comparison because last year we most of our services were closed and our front door was closed. So I was thinking we would see that change in this packet, but then I had to remind myself, no, that's not until next month.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any trustee questions or comments on the statistical report? Bob?
Consistent with what was reported on the earlier item, if you look at the number of participants in adult programs, despite being shut down and the door closed and all that for the last couple of years, to one degree or another, the number of attendees at adult programs has been virtually the same all 3 years, from 2045 2 years ago to 2098 to 2075. So each time it's been, within what, 40 total for a whole year from 1 year to the next. So, we've been doing a great job of keeping that service going, and the public has responded despite all of the reasons we could come up with on a moment's notice for why some things have gone down. The other thing that just struck me in particular was on packet page 63, the bottom data item on volunteers, looking at the number last year to the number of hours this year, huge number increase in the number of volunteer hours this year compared to last year. And, I'm trying to think of a way to publicize that, because it's just such a fantastic support from our community that we have so many more volunteer hours this past year than the year before. And I just wanted to say how fantastic that is. And it's even more than the volunteer hours 2 years ago. I mean, it's just, this last year has been an outstanding, and I hope there's some way that we are acknowledging them. I mean, we haven't had a volunteer breakfast in a long time, and I'm not sure we could get 4,000 people into the community room anyhow to have coffee and muffins, but some kind of recognition is, should be on our to-do list.
So funny you should mention recognition. So in April is volunteer month, and Sarah and Jordan, who works at the museums, have put their heads together, and we're inviting volunteers to join us at the Lower Presidio Historic Park for a picnic, an outdoor picnic. And historian Tim Thomas, who is also a Museum and Cultural Arts Commissioner, and he's also a history tour guide. He's a marine fisheries historian. Anyway, he's gonna lead a short walking tour at the Lower Presidio Historic Park. So we were thinking about how can we get a bunch of people together and how can we entice them to get together. And we thought, hey, if we have a outdoor picnic, that could be fun. And so you'll all be getting an invitation to that. I don't remember off the top of my head what date that is in April.
Excellent.
Saturday, the 23rd.
Oh, okay.
April 23rd, you said?
Yeah, the 23rd of April, Saturday.
Great. Okay, any other comments or questions about the statistical report?
I did want to say one more thing about volunteers, which is you see a huge jump because they are shelving our books, whereas we used to have paid staff doing that. They are retrieving the books off the shelf for our paging lists, which are hundreds of books a day are on a pick list that need to be pulled off. And then there's some other part that they're doing. They're still helping with RFID tags when for the Pacific Grove items that come over, they're putting RFID tags in them. So yeah, we're very dependent and deeply appreciative of our volunteers.
Very good. Thank you for highlighting that, Bob. Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 12?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. Any other comment on item number 12 before we move on? Seeing none, let's move to trustee comments. And I know Trustee Joshi has to be somewhere very shortly, so let's start with you.
Thank you. I had a chance to see the video on the Patron app that was posted. I was very favorably impressed. It's informative, of course, that's its purpose, but it's also entertaining, so it kept your attention throughout, and I want to compliment the team that put it together.
I second that. I've seen it as well, and I got a kick out of it also. Any additional comments, Harish?
No, that's
okay. Very good. Trustee Petty.
Stay safe and healthy. Things are going well, and the only distressing thing that I will bring away from this meeting is the thought that museum and library funding and staffing appears to be getting pitted against each other instead of them being supplemental, and that doesn't strike me as the way the agreement the trustees reached a year or two ago was based on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would put it in the perspective, though, that library positions are always pitted against police and fire and public works and recreation and museums. So, I mean, there's always that sort of, balancing act, in terms of the budget. So even if it weren't happening this way, it would be happening a different way. So in my mind, I understand concern, but I also, ultimately, we would have been competing with them anyway, but just a different process. So it's hard to know, kind of what the bottom line of that is, but I appreciate the concern as well and share that concern. Any other comments, Bob?
No, thank you.
Trustee Mora.
So yeah, I'm just echoing my comments about the few people doing so much for so many, and how much we appreciate all that. And the most distressing news I heard tonight was that Mary Jane is yet another time retiring. And I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude for everything that she's done so far, and we'll hang on to you as long as we can. So that's all.
Very good. Vice Chair Felguth.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Marcia said. It seems like we've had good people at the helm during some really difficult times the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, between budgets, pandemics, all of that. I really commend staff on being so nimble to turn what could have been a catastrophe into an opportunity. We're now branching into virtual programming. We have our RFID project completed. We're building up our core of volunteers, having successful fundraising. I'm really sorry we're going to be losing Inga and Mary Jane, but I'm excited about possibilities for where we're going to be going from here. And I hope as a board member, we can provide some support and comfort for staff. Thank you.
Please bring any items for checkout to the library help desk or self-check machines at this time.
Thank you. And I just would like to echo the comments of both Jennifer and Marcia. You've said it so well, especially Jennifer, that I won't even attempt to echo your comments. I will just second them. So if there's no other business to come before this meeting, we're adjourned to our April meeting. And thank you all very, very much. Good night.